when you're strange. Faces come out of the rain when you're strange. No one remembers your name when you're strange. When you're strange. When you're strange.
Stimming, or what my mother called having no control over yourself. As a child in the classroom, I would sit with my legs crossed, swinging my upper leg back and forth, all day long. All my childhood fears and tension collected in my knees, and it had to go somewhere. I would suck upon strands of my hair, and also suck upon my knuckles. This last is one stim that I still do to this day. All of this, again, was cause for much mockery and ridicule from the other kids, but I couldn't stop myself, no matter how hard I tried, until much later in life. Unusual obsessive interests and collecting things. It started with the television debut of A Charlie Brown Christmas when I was 6. Upon discovering that the Peanuts comic strips were collected into mass-market paperbacks, I had to find all of them. An obsession with clothes for Barbie dolls wasn't so unusual for a young girl, but learning about cinema history and ballet? Every book, every photograph, every newspaper article, every soundtrack I could get my hands on. I had to learn everything there was to know about those subjects. What can I say? I was a 40-year-old gay man trapped in the body of a 13-year-old girl. I was even reading the New York Times arts section by the time I was 13. This pattern has continued throughout my life with each new thing I've taken an interest in. Fashion history, classical music, Gilbert and Sullivan, musical theater, world mythologies, scale models, cats, vitamins and herbalism, water gardening, etc. If my other symptoms aren't convincing enough, this could be a clincher. What other tween child would be so passionate about an obsolete art form like silent movies? Yet another reason for my peers to excoriate me. Short-term memory, conversely. And yet, despite my encyclopedic knowledge of these and many other subjects, come on, Jeopardy! Bring me on as a contestant already! I still have a terrible memory for people's names, or I get them mixed up between 2 or more people. From this, I can see why people might think I'm either scatterbrained or rude. I know I have to work on this, develop some hacks. Literal thinking. Oh my God! There was that time in 6th grade when the entire class went into a screening room for an educational movie, and the teacher told us to sit in every other seat. Huh? I didn't know that every other seat meant 1 seat empty, 1 seat full, 1 seat empty, 1 seat full, etc., going around the room. By now, I realized the teacher was aiming to keep all of us far enough apart that we couldn't see each other's test papers. But at the time, I thought she was telling me to sit in literally every other seat except the one I was actually sitting in. A physical impossibility! No wonder I was on the verge of tears, and everybody else thought I was unbelievably stupid. Gods, I wish I could track down that teacher and demand she apologize for yelling at me and humiliating me in front of the whole class. But she's probably dead by now. And when the school bullies threatened,
"Rosie, you gonna die!"
of course I thought that meant they were literally going to kill me. And if I begged the teachers to let me stay inside during recess, they pooh-poohed my fear and forced me out onto the playground anyway, where the bullies ganged up to punch and kick me to within an inch of my life every chance they could get when they knew a teacher wasn't looking. No matter how much I screamed and begged for mercy, all that did was make them double down all the more, because they knew their torment was working. To the end of my days, I'll never understand why making a little girl cry is the greatest show on earth, more fun than a trip to Disney World. If it turns out that I'm positive for autism, then it means the other kids were right after all about this one thing. Their viciously cruel attempts to destroy me were still dead wrong, of course, but at some instinctive reptilian level, they had their finger on something that could not be explained by adult logic. At least not yet in the 1960s and 70s. Nor was it outwardly visible as some physical deformity, though little girl me stood naked in front of a full-length mirror, looking myself over and over, trying to find what was so terribly wrong with me, and I couldn't see it. So, if any of you guys who knew me when are listening to this, I hope you're proud of yourselves for figuring it out. When you think of me, do you still chortle with glee at the memory of what you got away with because no grown-up ever exacted the punishment you so richly deserved? And if Lady Karma did eventually catch up to you, did you ever figure out why? You do realize, don't you, that once your puberty testosterone kicked in, your already formidable strength would have expanded exponentially. A single gut punch really would have murdered me, and then you'd have some splainin' to do in criminal court and to my parents. Trust me, my father had enough clout and connections to get you tried as adults. But at the end of the day, even you have to admit, beating stage 4B makes me every bit as badass as any muscle-bound brute. One other incident of literalism turned out to be a harbinger of things to come. Again, it was in the 6th grade when a different teacher this time had us read The Golden Fleece and introduced us to the pantheon of Greek gods and their Roman variants. That's how I found out about Aphrodite Venus.
You mean there's an actual goddess of love? Why, that's exactly what the world needs!
Not love as in sex alone, but love as in people caring for each other all over the world. Not beauty only as sexiness, but beauty of all the arts and nature. Of course, the most hated girl in school would gravitate to a goddess who destroys nastiness and demonic impulses and insists that people be nice to each other. All the other kids thought she was either useless information or an irrelevant fairy tale from ancient history. But to me, Venus was real. Very real. And again, my classmates thought I was both stupid and completely freaking bonkers to think she is real, amazing, and deserving of a comeback. But I have been her ardent devotee ever since. Long before I knew other goddess worshippers existed, and long before I knew I am a Taurus rising lady, with Venus as my astrological ruling planet. Speaking of planets, wrong planet syndrome. Certainly my classmates treated me as though I didn't even deserve to occupy the same planet as them, let alone the same town. From kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, nobody else in my classes was persecuted as severely, as consistently, for as long. Any other kids who might otherwise have been picked on were probably secretly glad that I unwittingly drew the Bosteds' attention away from them. If I'd had to endure it for one more year, I'd have been dead before I turned 15. But even after I escaped the school bullies when I qualified for admission to private schools, my newer classmates still regarded me as being hopelessly weird. They just weren't beating me up because of it anymore. I mean, the way I howled at the moon every time I saw her, and still do to this day. Who does that? The first boy I ever made out with in 10th grade kept asking me,
"Why are you so strange?"
I don't know.
I had no idea how to answer that. 2 months later, he got expelled for sexual assault upon some other girls, which absolved me of any incentive to try to figure out this conundrum.
Well, he's far more fucked up than me, so I shouldn't take anything he said seriously.
Zoning out, or zoning in? Contributing to that aura of strangeness, I suppose, was the fact that I barely seemed to engage with this world at all, but instead went through life in a self-absorbed dream state half the time, what the Irish would call being away with the fairies. Nobody else had any idea of the stories, exotic places, and magical and heroic characters that populated my mind, constantly playing like movies on an endless loop, a universe parallel to whatever simultaneous mundane actions I was doing. Considering how much my various fantasy worlds occupied my mind, it's something of a miracle that I still got all my homework done, and aced most of it. The stage was the only place where the two worlds intersected, my only means of bringing at least a few of my fantasies into the open where others could see them. Of course, I did this clumsily at first, to widespread derision. But then I started getting good at it. Really good. The only profession I knew of where having feelings was an asset instead of a liability, the stage became my best chance, my best hope of finally being accepted, praised, loved, even rewarded for my weirdness. Needing lots of alone time. All those flights of fancy, of course, necessitated that I be mostly alone in my own world, pondering the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. Since the other kids hated me so much anyway, I had no problem at all in playing by myself, inventing imaginary friends to play opposite me in a board game, and switching from one side of the table to the other. And I rode my bike to places where I could be in nature, alone but with my mind movies for company, far away from the mean kids. My mother, having made an enormous social and financial leap when she married my father, thought we were living in an upper-middle-class paradise. To her, the near-constant threats I faced at school were
inconceivable!
And she refused to believe me, even thought I was lying when I tried to tell her how bad it was. But in nature, I was safe. Nobody attacked me there. After having been a social pariah all through elementary and middle school, it's not that I didn't want to make friends in high school. I just didn't know how. So when I got to boarding school, my first attempt at having a dorm roommate was an absolute disaster. I felt extremely encroached upon and had to escape to anywhere else to avoid being in the same room with her. Luckily, I had a sympathetic advisor who put in a good word for me so I could transfer to a single room, a rare privilege for underclassmen. I suppose I must have been regarded as antisocial, because the same thing happened at college my freshman year, and I had to petition for a single dorm room again. My mother started worrying that I would have a hard time in a marriage.
You will have to find someone very compatible.
For the time being, though, living in a single room, I could interact with other people only as I felt ready and able. Even then, when I was talking with a friend, especially one-on-one, I exhibited the stereotypical autistic trait of uncomfortable eye contact. I would look anywhere else around the room, even examine and fidget with various nearby objects while we were talking, as if that was another form of stimming. I've had to work hard to force myself to better focus on the face of the person I'm talking with. Ironically, the pandemic's mask mandates made this easier for me to look at someone's eyes rather than their mouth as they're talking. It wasn't until I met people in college who are as weird as me that I finally found a place to fit in and could enjoy laughter and intense camaraderie with them. We had a shared language based upon quotes from Monty Python, Doctor Who, Lord of the Rings, Tom Lehrer and Steel Eye Span songs, and other geek culture references. A habit I have since learned is another autistic strategy called Echolalia. In a world where I desperately wished life had a script I could follow, geek culture gave me a common frame of reference with others who loved the same things, a ready-made library of quotes that I could pull out and use in almost any situation. Then, while in graduate school, I discovered the local community of other nature mystics like me. Our shared vocabulary, based upon pagan pantheons and mythologies, was and is even more arcane and esoteric to the mundane populace than geek culture. Neo-paganism, or as I like to call it, nature mysticism, was the only religion I'd yet encountered where my ability to see nature's energy fields actually made sense and had a fairly large place in that religion. The nature mystics became my truest friends of all, the only people with whom I had a mutual understanding on every level, even surpassing my colleagues in the musical and theater worlds. But still, to this day, my me time is crucial to my ability to research, write, and complete any number of projects. Which brings me to technical skills and MacGyvering. I have kind of an outside-the-box way of looking at things, but it enables me to maximize limited space with strategic placements of hooks, pockets, and small shelves for keeping stuff organized. I can cobble together clever fixes using whatever oddments I have around the house. I can look at a thing and see how it can be done better. When I was working in HR, I figured out how to revamp the data sheets in affirmative action programs so that formulas would read off of each other across the sheets, making the whole system more accurate and easier to maintain. This ability has also served me well in doing custom sewing and alterations, tailoring a fabric to flatter any curve. Possibly my crowning engineering feat is my master astrology board, where I measured the panels to accommodate the meanings of all the planets, signs, houses, and even the lunar mansions, and hinged the panels so that the full 6-foot by 5-foot display folds down into a 2-foot by 2-foot bag. It is even magnetized, so I can easily shift placements on it. I am largely self-taught in various technical skills at up to an intermediate level. Sound editing in Audacity, video editing in iMovie, sheet music transcriptions in MuseScore, blogs in WordPress, email blasts in Aweber, a dashboard for controlling the flow of a talk radio show, and building up musical passages on a Korg music workstation until I have full orchestral arrangements. I have never been intimidated by technology that can be used for creative purposes. I'll dive right in, and I'm a quick study. The common thread that unites them all is they are like puzzles to me. And I love solving puzzles. Keeps my mind sharp. But wait, there's more! What about the autistic inability to shift gears, meltdowns, masking, blunt comments, pattern recognition, blindness to body language, naivete, and sensory overload? All that's coming up in Was It Autism All Along? So buckle up. I'm Rosanna Tufts, and we'll see you in the next video.
Ignominious that you haven't even noticed, and the pity is pretty, pity, pity, pity.